and welcome to Notes on Nature TV. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Jamie. And in this episode, we have a bird feeder tip from our wildlife gardening expert, Adrian Thomas.
Now, typically, you'd hang a feeder off a tree where you can reach it, or you might put some food on a bird table. But what if maybe you live on the second floor?
RSPB President Miranda Kristofnikov explains how birds keep warm in winter.
So this time of year you might see birds shivering exactly as we do. They're trying to raise their metabolic rate and actually generate heat by shivering those muscles.
And we have an update on our campaign to save our Minsmere Nature Reserve.
So we're really concerned that this development currently poses a significant threat to the wildlife that calls Minsmere and the Suffolk Coast home.
First, we have some of your wonderful wildlife photos to look at. Now, a couple of weeks ago in our Notes on Nature email that we send out each week, we asked you to send us some of your snaps of birds and other nature that you spotted. And we've had hundreds. So thank you so much. We're going to show you a few of them now. Now, the first one here is a marsh tit by Izzy Fry. And I have to say that Izzy sent in the most stunning set of photographs, these really cute little portraits close up of birds. What did you make of this one, Jenny?
Oh, it's absolutely beautiful, isn't it? I mean, I've actually never seen a marsh tit, so it's amazing to see one even in a photo. And I think it's fantastic that she's been able to identify it because they're so close to willow tits, and it's a real expert thing to be able to tell the difference between the two.
It is. I'm sure there's advice on our ID guides on our website on that, but and certainly I would struggle to tell the difference. They are both very beautiful species, and willow tits are found in a much smaller part of the UK, a much smaller area, a smaller range, if you will, whereas marsh tits are a lot more widespread. So you're more likely to be seeing a marsh tit, especially if one comes to your bird feeder.
And in fact, willow tits are now the fastest declining breeding bird in the UK. So they are becoming very rare indeed, sadly.
As part of Back from the Brink, we're working with Yorkshire Wildlife Trust in the Dearne Valley, South Yorkshire, to help recreate the scrub and young woodland that willow tits need.
So the next picture we are going to look at is this lovely shot of a blackbird, and it's just peeking in the window here, and it looks really cheeky. What do you think of this one, Jamie?
I think that this blackbird has got too used to being treated by Lindsay Taylor, who's obviously been giving it some tasty snacks, and it knows that if it comes and waits by the window, it's going to get fed. Now, that's really close to the house, and actually it is quite exciting when birds do sort of potter down onto the patio here and peep in at us. We haven't got them looking in quite to the same extent that Lindsay has there. But what a lovely relationship between human and bird. That bird knows that if it waits there and poses cutely, it's going to get fed.
Definitely. I've got loads of blackbirds this year. I don't know how other people are finding it, but I've got just a ton coming, and I feed them apples. But this week I ran out of apples for them because they just went through so many because we had quite a lot of snow this week. And they've been pulling up my bulbs because what they do is they go through the containers at my back door and they're just searching around for invertebrates and things in the soil. And as they do that, they just pull out the bulbs. So it feels really passive aggressive. It's like, oh, you've run out of apples, so we're just going to pull up all your bulbs and throw them around everywhere. But I don't mind because I love blackbirds. So I just stick all the bulbs back in again and it's absolutely fine.
I love that as a potential technique to get your attention. I mean, realistically, they're probably finding worms, we hope. Yes. And not actually deliberately destroying your garden. Yeah. But blackbirds, they do kind of, I'm just thinking about the blackbirds in my own garden where they've gone to sort of raised beds and flicked all the soil out as they go around the edges trying to find food. So they can be like little bulldozers, can't they?
They can, they really can. And they're quite aggressive. All the thrushes can be quite aggressive with each other. So you see them sort of chasing each other up. And I even had a field fair this week or just last week. And it's particularly aggressive. It was chasing all the other blackbirds away. But yeah, they're absolutely lovely to see.
So that's the blackbird. And actually, in the previous episode of Notes on Nature TV, another Jenny, my previous co-presenter for last week, pointed out that blackbirds get their name from not just the colour, but the fact that they're a bird, and that the term a bird used to refer to kind of smaller perching birds as opposed to larger fowl. But we're going to look at a larger blackbird now, and these are the rooks in the tree. And I picked this picture by Rod Jones because I know that they're quite early nesters. So we are going to see them back in their rookeries, back in their colonies soon, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love seeing rooks. I've got a rookery quite close to where I live. And you see them, they start flying back to the nest, and they've just got these huge sticks in their mouth, and they're obviously tidying up all the winter damage to their nests. I love the sound that rooks make. It really actually makes me feel sort of autumnal afternoons and the smell of wood smoke and that real sound of the countryside. So yeah, I'm a big fan of rooks.
And one of those big obvious signs that spring is on its way as well, when the rooks come back and you see them going back and forth with sticks. So an absolute joy to see. And that links beautifully to another member of the crow family. We've got a jay here by Rachel. They're quite hard to photograph. I find them incredibly nervous to even get close to, don't you?
Oh, definitely. I think I've probably only seen 1 or 2 jays in my entire life because they're so shy. You do hear them quite a lot. I find you've got a really harsh call. So if you're walking through the woods, sometimes you'll hear this incredible call, and that's a jay. But I just never see them. So incredibly lucky to not only see one, but then to get a picture of it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, so I feel very jealous of anyone who gets those in their garden. And autumn's always a fairly good time because they sort of fly back and forth gathering acorns. But in the harsher moments of winter, you may well get them coming to the garden as well. What photo should we look at next?
How about the blackcap?
Oh yes, this is a nice one, isn't it?
Look at that. And that's it's not got a black cap, that one. It's got a brown cap, and that means that it's a female bird. Does the juvenile have a brown cap in a black cap?
The juvenile female has a browny coloured cap. The juvenile male will have a brown cap, or maybe a blackish cap, or kind of a mix of the two. Black caps are interesting, aren't they? Because we have them here as a summer visitor, a bird that breeds here in the summer. The birds that breed here fly off south for the winter, and then they are replaced by other birds that come from sort of further east and north in Europe, and they come to the UK. I don't know if you get them up as far as Scotland, do you? The ones that come
we
from
do,
winter?
yes. So I don't generally get them as a wintering bird, but I get reports coming in of birds round about in places like Glasgow and Hamilton, other places like that. And I know my father has them, and he's very excited. He's had a female on his feeders for quite some time, and it was just joined the other day by a male as well. So now he's got 2. So he phones me up just to make me jealous, which isn't fair. But I had them as what are called passage birds, so passing through the garden in the autumn, and they've got a very sort of it's almost like a wren. It's like a tack sound, that sound of almost like 2 stones banging together. And I was wondering what it was, and I looked out, and there were 3 of them just sitting there in the garden. It was fantastic. So, but no, I don't get them in the winter, sadly.
Well, I think they're very, very smart, and the female looks pretty smart there with her not brown, not black cap. It's sort of almost like a goldy brown colour, very pretty. And another bird that I would love to get in the garden. Well, I have had one here a couple of years ago, and that's the brambling. And I'm pretty sure you get plenty more of those further north than here, don't you, Jenny?
Yeah, we get quite a lot of them. Sadly, again, it's not a bird that I get in my garden, but I know of other people who do. It's one of these things you would almost think it was a chaffinch at first sight, but it's kind of like a chaffinch that's gone through the wash or something, isn't it? And it's like the colours have washed out of it a bit.
It does. So you're looking, rather than for the sort of pink and bluey grey of the chaffinch, you're looking for a sort of warm orange and brown, black and white. And they do mix in with chaffinch flocks as you sort of hang out together. And bramblings will come here from the north and east parts of Europe, Russia, and they are known for forming the most incredible flocks. I don't think we get massive flocks here, but certainly in Central Europe, they've been recorded in their millions in places like Switzerland, I think.
Yes, I've seen videos of that. It's absolutely incredible. It's just fantastic to see these kind of really stupendous shots of birds all coming together and sort of, I suppose they're coming together for safety and just to find food in the winter. So, and quite a lot of birds do it.
So do keep an eye out for those. And that's a real treat to have visiting your garden, an exciting moment. I think we might have one more to go. What's this last one?
So this is a lovely little shot of a robin, which is perched in amongst a little tiny snowman, and the snowman's keeping warm with some knitting that somebody has been very, very carefully putting together during the lockdown.
This is Janice Dyson, who fashioned this little scene for herself, and then I think she's put some food down there. You can just see by the robin's feet to tempt the robin to hop into it for a fun little shot, and that'll make a lovely Christmas card, I think, for Janice to use next year.
It really would. That would be an absolutely delightful shot. But I think it just shows it's one of these things that a lot of people have been doing during lockdown. They've been picking up crafts and things like that. Have you been doing any knitting, Jamie?
No, but I know a lot of people that do. So certainly people I've chatted to in the last few weeks in meetings and said, how are you getting on? People are finding new ways to sort of amuse themselves and new crafts to keep themselves busy. And I think what could be better than combining a craft with a bird, with a bit of bird watching, making bird feeders, making bird houses. All these kinds of things are really fulfilling. And actually, when you see the birds using them or hopping into shots like this photo, then it's quite a reward, isn't it, for your hard work?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I do a bit of knitting myself, but I haven't thought of making anything that I could put outside and have for the birds. But there is a book I think you can get where you can actually knit birds. So that might be one to take up. We could see if anyone's got any knitted birds they'd like to send us photos of.
Please do. So if you're watching this and you have some knitted birds, we would love to see them for the next episode. Thank you once again for all your amazing photos. You can send them in to our new email address, which is notesonnnature@rspb.org.uk. Equally, if you've got any little wildlife videos, short ones, that you can send in as well, we would love to be able to show them for you. Now, take a look at this interesting little clip, which was filmed at RSPB Lodmore by Edmund Mackerel, who was out on his daily walk. These are shovelers. This is a type of duck with a huge, flat, shovel-like beak, and they are creating a vortex in the water to stir up food, the food that they want to get to, which is small, aquatic, underwater insects and plants. It's a bit further down than they can reach, so they need to stir the water to create a little sort of underwater tornado, a vortex, to bring that food to the surface. And it looks like they're working together. So the more shovelers there creating all this disturbance, more food is coming to the surface. Something's obviously drawn them in. There was clearly food at the beginning there, and they are really kind of working to get that food up. Shovelers have really, really interesting beaks. Apart from being massive and flat, they also have like a little fringe along them, and they use that little fringe as a filter. So the food stays in when they scoop it up and the water drains back out. Amazing birds and a stunning looking duck. Right now they are in their resplendent breeding plumage. So do go out and have a look at those if you've got some close by. If not, carrying on enjoying this clip. Now, Jenny, you've had an interesting visitor to your garden, haven't you? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, so this year, because I'm spending more time here in my kitchen doing work, I thought I would hang a feeder right outside the window so I could see the birds. And I noticed a few weeks ago now, there was a little blue tit coming to it. And when you look closely at the blue tit, it sadly only had one leg. And I was really upset to see that, first of all, because I get very emotionally involved in my birds. I think a lot of people do. And it's really sad to see one that got such a serious injury. And I didn't think it would make it. I didn't think I would see it again. I thought, gosh, that's, it's not going to be able to survive in the wild. And you do have that moral dilemma, I think, of what to do, because there's not really a lot you can do for a wild bird in that situation unless you can catch it. But it was, still flying strongly and still looked perfectly well in itself. So I just kind of thought, well, okay, that's it. I'm not going to see it again. But then it came back, and it came back the next day and the next day, and before long it was just a regular visitor.
How long has it been now? How long has it been coming for?
Well, it's a few weeks now. It's certainly, I haven't seen it today, but I'm just looking now to see if it was there. But the house sparrows have been sort of keeping the other blue tits off the feeder today. So they've sort of been guarding it and going, no, it's our feeder. So it's quite interesting, the sort of the pecking order that goes on in the garden with the different feeders. But yeah, it's just become this regular visitor. And instead of sort of feeling sad now when I see it, I sort of feel a bit buoyed up by it. I'm kind of thinking, wow, he's managing to survive in the wild with one leg and still get enough food and still survive it, through the winter, because we've had snow. We've been down to -8 in our temperatures so far, and yet he's still though I say he, could be a she, you know, still coming back every single day.
What an incredible story. How do you think the blue tit might have got that injury? Could it be a predator or maybe caught in some sort of human material?
Yes, I think that's both those are probably the highest possibilities. You know, certain feeders, particularly those nylon bags that you get with, you know, fat balls in them, or, you know, peanuts, things like that, they can be quite dangerous for birds as they can get their toes caught. And then, you know, it's just an injury that might cause them to lose the leg, or, as you say, a predator, you know, might be trying to escape a sparrowhawk or something like that. So it's really difficult to know. There's even a possibility it could have sort of been hatched out like that, you know, that's an injury it could have had from birth. So you do see a lot of birds with these kind of injuries, and apparently they can survive quite well as long as they don't need both feet. So if it's something like a bird of prey, which obviously needs both feet to catch a thing, then it's not going to do very well. But other birds, as long as they can find enough food and you know, get along in the wild, then they do okay.
Well, good luck to that blue tit. Hope we wish him or her all the best and hope they continue coming back to your feeder throughout the winter. And talking of feeders and garden birds, Big Garden Birdwatch runs until Sunday, the 31st of January. You can find out more on our website. It's happening now, Big Garden Birdwatch, in fact, rspb.org.uk/birdwatch. And there are loads of live events you can watch as well. So keep an eye on our website, on our social media feeds. There's tons for you to join in with, even if you don't have a garden.
So one of the questions we get asked around Big Garden Birdwatch is, how do birds keep warm in freezing temperatures? I've had -8 temperatures here in Scotland so far this winter, and I'm sure it's been cold in other places too. So here's Miranda Kristofnikov to explain.
How do birds stay warm in winter? Well, winter's obviously a very challenging time for all wildlife. There's the constant threat of freezing temperatures and the lack of availability of food and water. So it's a very challenging time for birds as well. So this time of year, you might see birds shivering exactly as we do. They're trying to raise their metabolic rate and actually generate heat by shivering those muscles. You also see them fluffing up their feathers. This is to trap a layer of air really close to their body, and that layer of air will warm up because of their body heat and basically act like a duvet, exactly as we were wrapping around a duvet or a warm blanket around us. Birds have different strategies to deal with the cold temperatures late at night. Some birds might look for shelter, so maybe a bit of loose bark on a tree or a hole in a tree or even a roof space. And some species choose to get together with other individuals and literally huddle together to share body warmth. A bird like a blue tit, common garden bird, will need to consume about 30% of its body weight every single day in order to have enough fat reserves to get it through the cold winter nights. So it's really critical at this time of year that we make sure in our gardens that there's enough food available. So I often invest in those sort of really energy and fat-rich treats for the birds. So things like mealworms and fat balls, as well as crushed peanuts and the normal seed and grain that I'd put out. So I really encourage you to keep your bird feeders really well stocked. The other critical thing at this time of year is to make sure that there's freely available ice-free water. So if you've got a pond, like you can see my pond behind me, I go and crack the ice on the pond, make sure that the birds have got water both to drink and to bathe in. And also around the bird feeders, I put a couple of little sources of water as well to make sure that there's water for the birds. I guarantee if you put out food and you put out water at this time of year, you'll be rewarded with hours of amazing bird watching.
Well, that was really interesting. And when you see birds fluffed up outside in the garden, you often think, well, that bird's fed itself well, it's found plenty of food, but actually all of that mass is actually feathers and air, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I've been told by people who know more about these things than I do that feathers are one of the best insulating materials in existence, really. They're, you know, that's why we have feather duvets and things like that, because they are just incredibly good and efficient at capturing air, and it's that air that forms that insulating layer for the birds. So you know, birds are very, very good at keeping warm.
Excellent stuff. Now, over to one of our nature reserves, and Minsmere is an absolute jewel in the crown for the RSPB. It's a magnet for birds and other wildlife, an absolute haven on the Suffolk coast, but it's currently facing a really serious threat. I spoke to our colleague Adam Rowlands, who knows the reserve very, very well indeed, to find out a little bit more. Adam, why is Minsmere so magical?
So Minsmere is one of the RSPB's flagship reserves. We talk a lot about biodiversity, and Minsmere is absolutely fantastic for the number of species it supports. More than 6,000 species of plant and animal and bird species, and that's more than any other RSPB reserve in the whole of the country.
What is the problem that we're facing at the moment? So we've got all these amazing species, huge range of different types of places they live, because obviously Minsmere's got woodland, reed bed, coast. It's got everything, hasn't it? Heathland. So what's the big threat that we're facing?
Yeah, so as you described there, Jamie, Minsmere is full of these valuable habitats, and not only represented at Minsmere, but along the stretch of the Suffolk coast and heaths, which include Minsmere. There's all these valuable habitats for wildlife. And there's currently a development proposal in to build a new nuclear power station, Sizewell C, right slap bang next to Minsmere. And in fact, part of the development itself will actually be on some of these precious habitats. So the Sizewell Marshes, site of special scientific interest. So we're really concerned that this development currently poses a significant threat to the wildlife that calls Minsmere and the Suffolk coast home.
It's very worrying. What does the threat actually involve? Can we go into a little bit in more detail on that?
Indeed. So as I said, some of that special wildlife habitat, the wetlands, the marshes in the Sizewell Marshes, site of special scientific interest, part of the development proposal actually talks about building a causeway, so to access the new development site across the marshes there, and that will actually destroy a significant part of the marshes. An area the size of more than 10 football pitches will be lost under that development. There's also quite a lot of pressure on the boundary of the reserve, so the noise, the visual disturbance of the construction site. This will be one of Europe's largest construction projects, right adjacent to the Minsmere Nature Reserve. So species like marsh harrier that hunt and forage in the area, it's already been recognised that their foraging habitat, where they feed, will be disturbed by this activity. So it's going to have a direct impact on them. The development also stretches offshore as well. So the power station will require water to cool the turbines, and that will be discharged to sea. And that cooling water, when it's taken in from the sea, that will suck in a huge amount of fish. Up to 3 million fish a year, it's estimated, will be killed in that process. And again, that potentially takes out food supply for some critical birds, the terns that nest at Minsmere and feed offshore, and the red-throated divers, which winter off Minsmere in internationally important numbers. The fish are their food source. So there's real concerns both on land and at sea of how this could impact on wildlife.
And how can people get involved? How can our viewers and our readers help?
Well, the proposal at the moment has been submitted to the Planning Inspectorate, who are the government's body who basically review these nationally strategic infrastructure projects. So they're reviewing the evidence at the moment, and they will be holding a public examination later this year to look into the evidence, look into the impacts, and make a judgment on how the development should and whether the development should proceed. So it's really important that people raise their voice to make sure that the wildlife that could be affected is protected from this development. And you can do that by going supporting the campaign that RSPB and Suffolk Wildlife Trust are running to protect Minsmere and protect the wildlife. If you go to loveminsmere.org, you can sign up to the campaign and make sure your voice is heard.
And it's incredibly quick to do. I think it takes less than a minute, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, it couldn't be simpler. You can read about all of the risks to the wildlife and add your voice to the over 70,000 others who've supported the campaign so far.
Thank you, Adam. And we'll keep you up to date with our Love Mindsmere campaign in our Notes on Nature emails and future episodes of Notes on Nature TV.
So something you can do to help birds closer to home is to provide food. And I put out lots of bird feeders, but I also try and keep my garden as wild as possible with lots of seed heads and places for insects to hide, so there's lots of food for the birds to eat through the winter. But here's Adrian with another idea.
So, Big Garden Birdwatch is coming up, the last weekend in January, and the key thing to getting ready for that is to put out some supplementary food. Now, typically you'd hang a feeder off a tree where you can reach it, or you might put some food on a bird table, but what if maybe you live on the second floor? Well, there's still options to do, and my study is on the second floor, and to do that I have rigged up a really homespun pulley system so I can yank the food up right outside my window, allowing me to do the Big Garden Birdwatch from there. So with a little bit of creativity, you can probably get some food anywhere around your property to allow you to do the Big Garden Birdwatch. Get your thinking cap on, I'm sure you'll come up with something.
Really, really good advice there from Adrian. And I remember living in a first floor flat in London, no garden whatsoever to speak of, but I did get one of those bird feeders that you can sucker onto your window. And we had all sorts of visitors, blue tits, great tits, a woodpecker, even a parakeet popped in one day, and we had really good close up views. So you do not need a garden if you've got access to a window and ideally a balcony or a window box or something that you can put bird food out on. You can get some really good views and help birds get through the winter.
And now here's something else for people who are perhaps living in the middle of a busy city. It's a moment of relaxation from one of our beautiful reserves up here in Scotland, Loch Leven.
Well, I'm feeling really calm now, and I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Notes on Nature TV. Look out for our live show as part of Big Garden Birdwatch. We'll be on Sunday the 31st of January from 10 to 11 a.m. on our YouTube channel. Remember, you can send us your photos to notesonnature@rspb.org.uk. As I say, wildlife photos, wildlife videos, anything like that, and we will try and show as many as we can in the next few episodes. And please do like this video wherever you're watching us, on YouTube, on IGTV. If you're on YouTube, please do subscribe to the RSPB channel. And if you're on IGTV, you can follow us on there.
And for everyone taking part in the Big Garden Birdwatch this weekend, best of luck. We hope you see some absolutely fantastic birds, and please be sure to tell us all about it. Thank you so much for watching.